Let's be honest. Most of us were taught to wait our turn, to tone it down, to save it for later. Later, when the kids are grown. Later, when the timing's right. Later, when you finally stop caring what they think. Well, I'm done waiting. I'm Hannah Hembree Bell, Texas divorce lawyer, mom, and woman who rebuilt her life from the wreckage. This is Not Saving It for Later, the podcast guiding women through divorce and beyond. The place where we stop whispering about what's hard and start talking about what's real. Marriage, divorce, money, motherhood, faith, sex, power, no filters, no fake empowerment, BS. Just straight talk and practical truth for women who are done pretending that everything's fine, because your next chapter isn't waiting on permission, and neither are we. All right, everybody, I am so excited for my guest today. His name is Hembree Bell. I'm sure even if you're listening, you can hear the smile that comes across my face when I'm talking about him. And it is so exciting to have Hembree here. So a little bit about Hembree. You're hearing me talk about him all season. But he is, in addition to being a darling husband and a wonderful father, he is a lawyer by day. And I always say he does big fancy cases where he's in trial, where there's lots of zeros involved for companies, kind of sometimes bet the company, big old case kind of stuff as like his day job. I would say in his like side hustle job, which makes no money, he is a wine travel connoisseur / expert planner. Is that fair, Hembree?
I'll leave that to you to judge.
I am the absolute worst and don't enjoy that whatsoever. But that's, anyway, one of Hembree's very special talents that I get to benefit from and not everybody knows all the time. So, Hembree, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Yeah, I'm so excited. Well, Hembree, it was obvious to me when we were thinking about doing the show that you were going to have to be a guest. I get the privilege of talking to you and knowing you up close in real life all the time. Oh. And everybody else doesn't necessarily. But I think we could talk about 1,000 things. But today's episode, I want to talk to you a little bit in the role of like investigator, like interview person, about coming into a ready-made family, right? Like blending a family, but we're not all the way blended, right? Because Hembree didn't have kids. So anyway, let's give a little context for that. So let's go back for those of you, a little context who don't know. So as a reminder, I got divorced about 10 years ago. I, timeline-wise, had moved out in May. Divorce was final in September. I met Hembree that following February. Mm-hmm. And we've been together ever since. I guess we could tell him how we met.
Yeah. I don't know. Have you told that story?
No, I haven't.
Okay. Yeah. We can totally do that. So
Hembree always tells parts, and then I have to add the zhuzh to the story. So, okay, you start.
Okay. All right. Well, and just to be clear, you were divorced in 2014.
Yeah, 2014.
2014. Okay. And so we met in February of 2015.
Right. The timeline could have been a little iffy.
Right.
Okay.
So just, CYA on that.
Such a lawyer.
Yeah. So they don't pay me for nothing. So we met through one of our mutual friends. He was my roommate and my best friend from law school. And you knew him because he was working with you at your law firm that you were at in San Antonio at that time. Mm-hmm. And I had come down to San Antonio to visit him. And in kind of the days leading up to that, he had kind of set up this kind of a blind date situation, but without calling it that. And he was trying to keep it cool, I guess.
Yeah,
without a lot of pressure.
On my side, I had no idea that there was any kind of a setup. All I knew was Ricardo's lawyer friend Hembree from the fancy job was coming into town. That's what I knew.
Yeah, and I was living in Washington, D.C. So, so he was just like, oh, well, we can go out to dinner and you should meet my friend Hannah and whatever. And she's going to bring a friend too. And he didn't make it sound like a date situation, but it kind of totally was.
Right.
And
we sure know that now.
Yeah, we know that now. So And he had sent me this. He's like, oh, and here's a picture of her and this and that, and it was. I mean, obviously, you looked beautiful in the picture. It was perhaps not the most beautiful picture I've seen.
I'm rolling my eyes if if you're not watching this and you're listening, because Drew has he's changed his tune as he's become a married man of aged years. But he used to talk about how it was the worst picture that's ever been taken of me.
But it was still a good picture in the grand scheme of things. Just not the best picture that you've ever taken, just to be clear about that. So anyway, I go down and we're in the office parking lot, the parking garage, and going to meet Hannah. Ricardo and I are going to meet Hannah.
Well, and I have to interject this part for the ladies, because y'all can know how much I didn't really realize a date situation was happening, because I had my hair in a ponytail. And not like a cute ponytail. You know, if you're going out on a date with somebody you think this is happening, you are going to fix your hair. You're going to curl your hair. It's going to be ready to go. And mine was I did wear a good dress. I remember that. I liked that dress for a long time. The one had like leather in the middle. Anyway.
It's green, right?
Navy blue. I wish I still had it.
I was close.
Yeah, close. Drew's also colorblind, so what do you know? And anyway, so my hair was in a ponytail, so I was not thinking that this was a date situation.
Yeah. So, but we're in the parking lot in the sort of, not ideal lighting conditions of the parking garage, and Hannah walks out, and I'm just like stunned. It was totally surpassed my expectations based on the picture that I had been given. And I thought, Ricardo's he's been holding out on me. He did not give me an accurate representation. So I was immediately taken.
Yeah. And I saw Drew and I go, oh, whoa, I'm in trouble. Whatever. I saw Drew. I remember thinking that. And then I joke because, and this is very indicative, if you think about it, Drew, like how we are in real life now. Like the basis of mine and Drew's relationship is I give him a real hard time and he likes it. I mean, that's kind of most of the way, which I don't even think about as being abnormal. Except sometimes we'll be around people.
Maybe it's not abnormal.
I don't know, but people look at me like I'm being mean to Drew. I'm like, it's like that meme that there's this like guy getting yelled at by this Hispanic girl and she's all up in his face or whatever, and he's looking at the camera and he is like, and it's like, if this is happening to me, you leave me alone because I'm exactly where I want to be. That's kind of the way. So anyway, so I get in the car and Ricardo had a little 2-seater convertible. He was always having some kind of like girl car, some 2-seater convertible car. And so Drew was sitting in the front passenger seat with Ricardo, and then Drew was trying to get in the back seat. And I was like, and Drew is so much taller than me. And I'm like, no, I'll climb in the back. He's like, oh, well, what would my mom say if she saw me? And I'm like, your mama ain't here. And he, okay. And I laughed because from that moment forward, that was it, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, no, it was. And, just hit it off from there. And
I think Drew, what's important. Okay. So that's the like meet cute story.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, well, we should probably tell. It's kind of funny because
I'm not really sure which part you're about to tell.
I'm about to tell. Well, I'm about to laugh because so we go to dinner and then it was this great dinner. And I remember Drew just like, now that I know Drew, it's so funny. Drew was just droning on and on about wine and all this stuff, the way like especially young Drew Bell used to do, just like Drew, bless him, and I love you so much. He loves to tell people stuff he knows. Like the man loves nothing better than to tell you something he knows about. Okay, and he knows about wine things. And I remember just sitting there, little gal from Van, Texas. I never had a good glass of wine in my life, and I'm just looking at him and just like, I think I'm gonna let this fancy man fall in love with me. I do think so. I think that's gonna work out. Anyway, and we go through the night. I don't even remember all of it. We end up at that one bar in San Antonio. Do you remember? It's like what that place was called. It's 2-story. If you've been in San Antonio in the Pearl, you know what I'm talking about. And we go in there. And we're like, and this is very fun. Me before getting divorced and me like kind of right after this period of time is not like a go to the bar after you go to dinner and hang out kind of person. I'm like can we please eat dinner at 6 and can I be home by 9:30 is my perfect evening. But that Hannah, post-divorce Hannah, which some of y'all post-divorce, there's this period where it's like, you're just kind of, whoa, baby, here I am, world. We end up at the bar. And Drew, at some point, we were in a booth, I guess, and like leaned over and literally kissed me in the middle of the bar. And it just makes me laugh because the first and only time I've ever been kissed in the middle of a bar, and I ended up marrying him. So I don't know. I just think that part's kind of funny.
Oh, good move, I guess.
Yeah. Well, because you were in town. You've said before, right? You were in town for this limited period of time.
Well, that's right. I mean, the clock was ticking to try to make some connection, something happen. And yeah, so just kind of went for it, I guess.
And, I think back to that, Drew, and I just think about how incredible it was that you entered that situation. And like one of the things I think that I've now knowing you since 2014, so for 11 years going on, that I find so incredible is your open mind. And so I think that's one thing for anybody listening, guys or gals, it's mostly girls listening, but I'm sure there's going to be some guys listening, is that you had an open mind. Because I believe, I'm pretty sure, right? Ricardo told you this gal's divorced and she's got 3 kids.
Yeah. No, I knew that.
And that's not usually going to be on like someone's Bumble profile, or Bumble wasn't even really much of a thing, at least I wasn't on the Bumbles back then. To say like, lady with 3 kids, would you like to come get you some, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, and obviously like it required more of an open mind as things went along, because we kept talking after that, and started seeing each other and doing this long distance. But that's the point where okay, is it really going to be a thing when she has these kids, which is totally different from my situation, where not only do I not have kids, but no one I know has any kids in DC, because people don't once they have kids, they move to Virginia and Maryland. Yeah, I mean, my thought process at the time was essentially like, you don't have to project so far in the future and make decisions based on what you think the situation might be. If it feels good and right, and let's just take it one step at a time and see what it's like, as opposed to assuming what it's like.
Well, and I think that's a point that a lot of people could learn from, because I think a lot of people, and there's a lot of wisdom out there that's like, get your standards and never settle and make a list of all the things you want in a person. Would gal with 3 kids from somebody else been on your list of things you want?
Well, no, of course not. And I mean, but maybe don't be so sure of yourself. You don't know. You can think that something is or is not what you want, but you may not know actually, until you try, I guess, or at least, approach things with an open mind. And it's definitely not for everybody. It wouldn't have worked for everybody. But
yeah,
but
things took a turn.
But I felt very strongly that you were for me. And so I didn't want to let my assumptions about, the circumstances of your life, sort of deep six that before it really even began. So,
yeah. And like big plot ruiner, kind of skipping to the end, and then we can fill in some stuff in the middle. I mean, ultimately that young Drew, right? 10 years ago, 11 years ago, Drew, single, never been married, really, hadn't had these like big long-term relationships that were like close to marriage. You weren't in those sorts of situations. Making this decision like, hey, yeah, I'll go to dinner. I'll keep talking to this gal. On the whole, in case anybody needs the TLDR version, was that a good decision for you?
It was a great decision. The best decision.
I know. And I say that, like, can you talk a little bit in general, like zoom out about that Drew then versus this Drew now? And like some of the like broad strokes benefits of having that open mind and considering someone who had had some life that you hadn't, and who'd had some, what some people might call baggage. I don't call it baggage, obviously, but like for also to give some people who are listening some hope. A lot of people listening, the women are going to have kids and feel like, and I definitely feel like nobody, and I was told by my ex-husband, no one's ever going to want you with 3 kids. And they feel that way. Like, obviously I got you, and you are not, like, you were obviously wonderful and amazing, and you're not the only one of your kind, but for people listening in that big picture. So you made this, what some people would think was like kind of a wild decision to say, okay, this gal's down in Texas and down in San Antonio at the time. And she got these 3 kids, and it's a situation, but I'm going to see about this. Can you tell them a bit about what benefits you've gotten as like a person, like how you've grown, some of those broad strokes things that especially maybe wouldn't have happened had you gone the more traditional route of some little blonde gal and had your first baby and whatever?
Well, I mean, so there's a lot there. I mean, first of all, like, it wasn't just the fact that you had kids. I mean, you lived halfway across the country, right?
Yeah,
I moved to Texas for you, and it was able to work out with my job, which was great. But it was after we were dating for several months, we made the decision to move my life from Washington, where I'd lived for 5 years, and where I had most of my friends and that sort of thing, down to Texas. And it was kind of a belief in us and our relationship that led me to do that. And we can talk, I think we're going to talk probably more about like how we integrated all of this with the kids themselves. But as far as what sort of the benefits are of dating someone with that experience, with that life experience, I mean, there are a lot, and it's probably even hard for me to identify all of them, but you get somebody who has been through a lot of different parts of life that I hadn't been through, and can kind of teach you about just, kid things. I mean, when we had our own baby, it wasn't like we were both going in there blind, not knowing anything. It was like I was going in there blind, not knowing anything, but it was like, oh, okay, well, this is, old hat for Hannah. So, I don't have to, it's a lot less stressful when your partner has already done that.
Yeah, I think definitely marrying a mama, you see the really gigantic benefit of that if you have another baby.
Yeah, for sure.
That's
Yeah.
like obvious. Like, it probably felt the most beneficial when the baby's freaking out and crying, and when you're, if both of you are new, you don't know, you're like, should we go to the ER? And I'm like, she's gonna be fine, put that baby back down, she needs to go to sleep.
So that's like a very concrete thing, but there's also like life perspective things. So there are times when I think 2 single people with no kids, that they get wrapped up in things about themselves and their own lives, and they lose perspective, I think. And certainly that was true for me a lot of times. But when you have kids to focus on, and that which become the priority, even if they're not your kids, if they're your partner's kids, because they're kids and they're in your life, they have to be a priority. And the way that you relate to them and treat them and stuff, that all becomes so much more important than a lot of like little minor things. And so it gives you kind of a different perspective on what counts and what doesn't. It also lets you see people and how they interact with people that are like the most important to them. And I think you learn a lot about a person, and how, like in your case, how selfless you can be when you're willing to do so much and sacrifice so much for the people you care about, and that person that you care about could also be me, right? And so it gives a nice a nice preview of that. So I think it's very, very different for sure. Obviously, the basic contours of a relationship are still there. They're in either case, but I do think that you get to see the other person in a sort of more complete context, and you get to see it ahead of time, which is nice. You don't have to get married first and have kids first before you get to see the person in that way. And I think the notion that someone who's divorced with kids is never going to be, is never going to be desirable again, or is nonsense now more than ever. That probably now that may be true for some men.
Yeah, fuck those guys.
But those guys, there's a pretty good chance that they suck anyway, because
they're not having any open-mindedness about it.
Right.
Well, it depends on their age. Okay, so I shouldn't be so harsh. Like, if they're, as you get older, I guess in particular, the likelihood that the dating pool is going to be a mama.
Yeah.
Or vice versa, a guy with kids, obviously.
Well, and it's fair to not want kids at all. And if you're one of those guys, then, that's fine. I get that. But, there are a lot of men out there who will absolutely give it a chance, who, won't see it even really as a major drawback. And so, I think I get the fear, but I think that fear is overblown a little bit.
Before we go any further, let me ask you something. What if you didn't have to Google your way through divorce at 2 a.m.? What if you actually had a place with real women to talk to, real answers in real time? That's The Circle. It's where I go live every single week, unpack the hard stuff, and help you stop spinning. Go to myconfidentdivorce.com/circle because confusion costs more than clarity ever will. I cannot wait to see you in there. For listeners of Not Saving It for Later, you are going to be ready to take the bull by its horns and get on top of your custody situation. That's what we do around here. The thing is, you're going to be inundated all over the internet with every single tool, course, toolkit, PDF that exists because people want to make money off you in the situation. But here is what I'm going to tell you. In my experience as a divorce lawyer and as a person going through this for close to a decade, the number one tool I recommend for you is Our Family Wizard. I have used this personally in my own life for like 6 or 7 years now. I need to go back and check. But I've also recommended to hundreds of clients. And what this tool does is pack such a punch at giving you back freedom and control in your life. Because if you've been doing this long enough and you're a member of the club, you've been on a Friday night getting a phone call, 20 phone calls in a row, 17 text messages, 7 or 8 emails all at once inundating you. And that experience can feel very frightening, terrifying, and out of control. But what Our Family Wizard does is bring everything into one app. You can even get it ordered by the court, where that's the only place that they can communicate with you. So you've got one place to check, not, the plethora of all of God's green internet. So if you're in the middle of custody drama, you need to get this app. It is not expensive at all, and you will save potentially thousands and thousands of dollars in future court costs if you have to go back because of the streamlined way that it handles communication in the co-parenting and custody space. So if you want to know more information, they've got some special deals for y'all. We were able to snag for Not Saving It for Later listeners at ourfamilywizard.com/HHB. Well, and I know you've talked about becoming a lot more of an empathetic person. From like the Hembree Bell I was talking about, if you can put yourself back in his shoes, being at that table and talk about all the things, to Hembree Bell sitting here with me on this show, like in that empathy journey. Can you talk about sort of the impact of being with someone with some life under them and how that's played out in the empathy way?
Well, so that's true. That's certainly true. I mean, part of it is being with you, and you're such an empathetic person. So
maybe not.
But and learning that from you. But it's also about having to be in a situation where other people's needs are like more important than your own, and need to be considered in a sort of heightened way. And nothing does that more than kids. And so Yeah, I mean, I certainly have learned over the years and like early on a lot that, um, it's when you're in a situation when with kids are involved. I mean, you need to sort of use your empathy muscle a little bit more to understand where they're coming from and treat them with kindness. I mean, as a general matter, it's not that hard to be nice to kids, but sometimes they can be frustrating. Sometimes they're in a difficult situation, and it's not about you getting your emotional needs met by them. It's how to help them as much as you can, and so you just don't get that if they're not there. So.
Can you go back to remember as like it was starting, right? And we were just dating, we were long distance. I remember for both of us, it's like something's going to have to give because neither one of us wants to be grown-ups in a long distance relationship.
No.
And so just I'm remembering like in the beginning when I was still finishing up law school and all of that. Did you have any sort of things that you would have thought in your mind are central tenets of like what you thought or what you wanted for your life or fears or anything that got debunked? Like, for instance, I mean, I guess if you don't want to talk about this, you can tell me, but I remember you saying to me, this fear, it was after Barrister's Ball, this fear that us being together was getting like more and more serious, that you wouldn't be the number one person in my life because I had these kids. You remember that?
Yeah, of course I remember. And yeah, no, I remember exactly. And I mean, I think
it's fair to think that. Like, I'm not,
Yeah.
I don't blame that Drew for thinking that, but can you talk about like that fear that you had? How did that end up playing out? And like, what would you say to him now if you could go back?
Well, it's just not that simple, right? I mean, that's sort of the message I would give. I mean, I think at least for me, growing up, you have this idea that like, you're going to have this relationship and you eventually get married. And with that person, you'll just sort of be the number one person for that person for however long of time you have before you have kids. And that's sort of like one period of your relationship where you just sort of focus primarily on each other. And then you have kids and those kids become sort of like equal players in the whole thing, right? And it's just like not that simple, right? I mean, it is true that like when someone has kids, they are like the top priority, but it doesn't make there's not like a limit to the amount of love and affection that a person can give. Certainly not a person like you. And what I found is that it just became sort of I never felt like neglected or that you didn't have enough like love to share with me or anything like that. And I guess that's kind of how I was imagining it before, but it's just not really. And
like there's a love pie and like some of the pieces were gone.
Or like an attention pie. And it really it wasn't like that because it ends up being a joint project. It ends up being a group effort. And you end up working together to do this thing, which is even better than the other person just like focusing 100% on you because you're accomplishing something together.
Well, and what I would say too is love magnifies or multiplies, right? Love multiplies. It's addition by addition. And so everybody who's a parent of more than one child knows this. You have one, and then you think your heart's so full you're going to burst. You couldn't possibly love another thing. And then you have your second baby, and you're like, how is it possible that I literally love them as much as the other one, right? It just doesn't run out. So I think that's the thing I would tell somebody in that thing, like how, if you're not going to be their top priority or whatever. Now, depends on are you measuring minutes? If you're measuring minutes and you want to have a minute counter where you get the most all alone minutes with this person versus these other little creatures get all the most alone minutes, well, I mean, you might come out short on that because just raising kids there's a lot to it. But I like what you said about eventually it becoming a group project. So you do get minutes, but they're just co-minutes, right, that you do together. And I think, Drew, if I was, knew about us, I would be very interested in how we did that. So like, okay, so we were dating long distance. It kind of became clear, like, all right, it did become clear. This long distance for us grown up people is not going to work. I remember saying I didn't climb out of hell by my fingernails to miss somebody my whole life. And Drew's job, he was able to relocate her. And I was like, look, if you get to Austin, which is the place where his law firm had an office, like if you'll get to Austin, I'm going to eventually get there one way or the other. Okay, so we sort of made that deal. And that was in August, we kind of made that decision. And then, but it wasn't coming to pass until December. And we were getting a little rocky in between there for a little bit. Like we were both really sick of it after, I don't know, 7-8 months of doing it. No, in that October, just being like, ooh, maybe October is a month for us.
Well, and it's a long distance. It wasn't like a short distance.
Yeah, and there's kids, and they're here every other weekend, like getting back and forth. And we were studying for the bar, and then I was starting at the big law job. I mean, it was just a lot already to juggle. And then Drew moved to Austin and lived down on 5th Street across from the fire station down there.
Yeah. Building's not there anymore.
Is it not?
No.
What's there now?
I forget. I think they're building something there new, but they tore that building down.
Oh, okay. And this like very like bachelor pad of his dreams, 2-level, 1-bedroom, gigantic apartment, very loft, concrete situation. And I had my house down in San Antonio. Now, one very important factor for us is that the kids were not with me primarily at first. So I had the kids back then. I was the quote unquote dad in the situation. Like in Texas, most people that you meet, like somebody is going to be on what's called a standard possession or expanded standard. We only had standard possession. So it'd be 1st, 3rd, and 5th weekends from Friday at 6 to Sunday at 6. And then Tuesday nights for dinner for an hour and a half. And that's the only time I had the kids. So that gave me a lot more time than people who have their kids in the reverse or all the time. Maybe there's not another co-parent, a dad or what, mom in the picture. So I think that we have to give that context and that's why everything bad that's ever happened to me in my life, every single thing ends up working for good. Because in a way, I think back, like had the kids been with me all the time and I didn't have as much space as I did, I don't know how things would have gone with us in the same way. But because I had that space, the negative of the kids not being with me, I could have sat in a room and cried for the rest of my life. We talk on the show always about being bitter or better, and you get to choose. Chose better, of course, at every turn that I can remember as I'm sitting here. And part of that better was to take advantage of like leverage, right? I have, ever since I've been doing anything on this planet, leverage whatever's at my disposal, And what was at my disposal was some more time. So that gave us some freedom where you were in Austin and I was in San Antonio. And we just burned the pavement between up and down 35, back and forth between the two. So, Drew, can you talk or what?
Well, no, but I think you're right. I mean, it's like, obviously that's not the circumstance you would have drawn up.
No.
But, while it didn't give you your first choice, you were able to, make the most of what it did give you, which was time. And, it would have been, a different type of challenge had the custody situation been different.
Well, and especially as contentious as mine was and as difficult as it was and has been, I think that would have added another layer that would have been a lot. Now, easing into it is one thing, but like going straight into the deep end is another. And like, that's a point, y'all, who are listening. A lot of women sit around and cry about all the time their children aren't with them, even if they're in the situation where they have them every all the time except for these every other weekends. And the whole weekend they're sitting around almost like staring at the door waiting on their kids to get home. And I get it. Like, give yourself a minute to do that if that's what you need. And then also, like, it is what it is. You can do it like it's like that Rumi quote, right? That you're like it's marching into battle, or you can do it like it's a dance. Which is it? You get to choose. You're going to sit and stare at the door until they walk back in? Or are you going to make a life for yourself? Are you going to rediscover yourself? And for me, that period of time was the first time I'd ever been alone as an adult, because I went straight from college to immediately married. And that was the first moment. And then all these kids. So first moment in my life I'd ever been alone as an adult. And it was rocky. It was not easy at first, but it did give us this room, Drew, to do, what has ended up being the best. I didn't have my first choice when it came to the kids. ultimately that did turn into my first choice life. But I think the reason why that was possible is because all along the way, I always chose the best available option without sitting there and crying about and staring at and regretting all the things that could have been instead.
Well, and also, just because you are kind of making the best of your situation doesn't mean that you are fully accepting it.
Right.
Those are different things, right? I mean, you can be making the best of your situation while plotting to change it, right?
Yeah, well, as we were.
Right. Exactly. I mean, you can recognize that, hey, this difficult situation gives, not what I would have chosen, but it does give you XYZ opportunities that you wouldn't have otherwise had, right? And at the same time, can I do something about the situation that I would like to change? Yes. Okay. Well, then, maybe let's try to do that at the same time. You can do these at the same time.
Right. And okay, so going back to that, you've moved up to Austin. You're in your bachelor paradise.
Yeah, it was like a real concrete jungle.
Yeah, it was something. You're there. We're going down on Rainy Street. We're having brunch every week or every other weekend. We're going out to fancy dinners. I was like, always, y'all almost falling asleep with a glass of red wine on Friday night at the table, Andrew, back then. And we're watching Game of Thrones on Sunday night. And that was sort of the period. And I think that we did this part differently than a lot of people do. I think that we began our life together. At the time, we weren't even necessarily like, I'll say this. I remember talking on the phone when I lived in that little house in San Antonio and being like, look, I'm looking for this would not be in the dating advice books probably, but very early on, like, look, man, I'm looking for like my person in life. Like, I ain't messing around. I'm not trying to date a bunch of I'm just not made that way. Like, that's what I'm looking for. And I remember you being like, well, yeah, that's what I'm looking for too. Like, we were both only interested in doing something long distance and all the trouble this would be if it was like really a thing, if not the thing. Right. So I think we were pursuing a forever path or not. I mean, fair. So like from the beginning. And I think people with kids are a little bit, generally speaking, going to be a little bit more like that because of the kids and like eventually introducing them. You're not going to, I mean, some people go like, there's that one great, what is it? What's her name? Ali Wong, that whole skit, that like her comedy thing about divorced moms. So like you know, there's some divorced mom energy that you might be bringing into it at first. But, once you're really talking about dating and stuff, we were from the beginning looking at is this my person situation. Right?
Yeah. Well, you, I think if you have kids in the picture, you have to be more selective. And if you're not like a complete jerk as a guy, you will understand that.
Yeah. And so I think when that happens, a lot of people, I've seen it from my clients over the years, and a lot of people, they live closer. So obviously they like meet each other and they live maybe around the corner, or their kids are on the same soccer team or whatever. So they know each other and they live closer by. So the amount of time that they can spend together is pretty limitless, really. And people will pretty quickly find themselves almost living together or actually living together. And they do a lot of this really quickly. And then they mush together a family situation really quickly. The threshold for doing that for a lot of people is a lot lower because they've already done it once. And like, our brains want what's comfortable. And people who were married before, it can be pretty comfortable to be married and get used to having someone at the end of every day to come home and tell about your stuff to. Having someone help maybe, I don't know, steam your shirt for you if you got a big presentation. Help, empty the dishwasher, you do top, I'll do bottom situation, right? So I think it can be, it's probably more the norm and a lot more tempting to just slide straight back into that sort of house situation, which we couldn't do because we lived farther apart and then you lived in Austin. So can you talk a little bit about our approach, or at least, from your perspective, and I can add color to whatever I think, but I'll call him out on his BS. Of course. Don't worry. I got you. But share.
Yes.
But share a little bit about your vantage point and approach once you'd been here and I'm in San Antonio, and sort of when we really settled into a routine in life, a year and a half, 2 years in? Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, so it was like you said, for about the first year and a half. Then I had a work assignment for a few months that made me travel a lot, up to Virginia. But then after I came back from that, I moved out of that apartment.
No, we got engaged. Wait a minute. You're getting the timeline screwy.
I am?
We moved in together and got engaged before you went off to Virginia.
Right before. That's right.
Like right before,
Yeah,
right?
No, you're right. Right before
So,
we did that.
but I'm thinking about like even in the early days, just when like how we decided when you met the kids and like your approach, like just very beginning when I mean, I'm not necessarily calling it advice, but giving a point of view of a guy dating a gal with 3 kids. And you're also not like living in the same town, and you're not all of a sudden like moving in and like, oh, hey, there's this new dude here.
Well, and this really even started before I moved. I mean,
Yeah.
I met the kids, I think about 2 months after I met you, like in a real way, right? And I think.
And just like saying hi when we went to Barristers. Is that when you met him?
Yeah, it was real. Well, it was the first time I met them. Maybe it was then. It was really fast. But then there were, other times when we started going out to dinner and, lunch and that kind of thing. And, I think my view on it was like, obviously, I got to get it right. Because if I screw up with the kids, then this whole thing's over. Because like I'm, Hannah can't, as a responsible person, keep me around if the kids hate me, right? Like that's not a choice. So at a minimum, they can't hate me, and I don't really know what to do to make kids like me because I was never around them. But it's not that hard to be nice to them, and what are the kinds of things from their, I tried to think about it from their perspective. Like, why everyone kind of knows that like it can be like a scary and difficult thing for a kid with a parent who's divorced, to have like the new boyfriend brought around. And
by the time you were coming around, we were like, okay, we're pursuing this, right? It wasn't like you started coming around and we were like, well, we'll see. It was like, we're really turning into a thing.
Yeah, well, and I think that was by design.
Yeah, I'm just saying that it's like, didn't start right away. We were careful to be like, okay, we're really serious about this before we're going to do that to the kids and like introduce you as boyfriend. Even the first time you met him, I think we were with Ricardo and it was just like, they happened to come to lunch where I was with several friends. Yeah. Right. And like, oh, here's Mr. Drew. Because they called him Mr. Drew.
Mr. Drew. Yeah, Mr. Drew. Yeah. But so like, I mean, look, why is that such a difficult thing for kids? Well, it's not that hard to figure out, right? I mean, you have a number of reasons. I mean, first of all, to the extent that they harbor any hopes and dreams that their parents are going to get back together, that pretty much dashes that, right? Yeah. So... and it's your fault as the boyfriend. You're the agent of that. You represent someone who is potentially invading their home, right? A new, possibly permanent element in their home that's going to change the entire dynamic of how they operate in their house. You are siphoning attention from their parent. Away potentially, right? At least there's the fear of that. And then how are they supposed to relate to you? I mean, are you going to be mean to them? Are you going to be some kind of like harsh disciplinarian? Are you going to, add a bunch of new rules? What do they have to do to stay on your good side, et cetera, et cetera? And so, I mean, I think to the extent if you're coming into a situation like this that you can alleviate those fears and not be scary in those specific ways, I think that's the best way to do it, right? Don't pretend. This was like number one, right? Like, don't pretend you're their dad, right? Now that, I don't know a lot about this parenting stuff, but but that seems to me to be pretty obvious, and I don't really understand how people screw that one up.
They do. It's like,
they do.
hey, this new guy's here. You just met him. He's dad now, and like, we're gonna call him dad. And like, I don't even know your middle name.
Yeah, don't make the kids call you dad. I mean, certainly not at first. I mean, there are some circumstances where that can work out, whatever. But like, eventually. But like, if you're just like the boyfriend, like, duh, you're not their dad.
And don't start hollering at them.
They don't owe you affection. They owe you a minimal amount of respect, but probably less than they owe strange adults, because you're the one that's on their turf. Don't get mad and take it personally if they don't like you. They are not under any obligation to like you, right? They don't have a choice in the matter. This is being forced upon them. And try to have some level of understanding about that. And, it's probably a good idea if they associate you coming around with something good, like getting like little gifts or whatever,
ice cream,
so that something that they can look forward to, as opposed to something that is disruptive, right? But those are kind of like some basic principles that I always thought about, that most of which seem fairly obvious to me, but but I think a lot of people get wrong because they are afraid of losing control over their environment, and nothing creates a loss of control over your environment like throwing a bunch of kids into it. But you just have to accept that.
Yeah, I think it's just such a testament to you, Drew, because as you're talking about that, the thread through it is, this isn't about you. Now, it's hard to look because your own life is about you. But like when you're in that situation, the relationship with the kids, it isn't about you. Certainly at first. And everybody who has kids knows, like your own biological children, it's like, it's about them ultimately. And that's the point. And don't, one recommendation I would give is like, don't expect these kids to fill up your cup. Don't expect them to make you feel good and better. It's too much expectation to put on a little pumpkin. And it's scary and it's hard and they've been through a lot. And like, Drew, your willingness, talk about selflessness, like your willingness to go into that situation and just be focused on what was best for them. And like, look, everything you do for a mother's child, you do for her.
Right. And she knows that.
She knows that. Well, and I think that matters so much, and so many people don't get that. But every time you're sweet with those kids, every time you take them for ice cream, every time you have patience, every time you sit down and play a chess game with them that you've already played 17, you don't want to do it again. Every time you pretend to care about Roblox, like whatever it is, it's such a gift to your woman. So you can look at it as doing good for these kids. And you might get like, they don't appreciate it. They don't deserve it. Like they're little punks and they may be big old punks. Well, we've experienced some punk behavior over the years. But you can also look at it as, hey, the benefit I get, the reward I get is that this gal is seeing me love these children who are an extension of her. And every time I love them, I love her. And it inures her to you more. So if you want to be like really calculating, manipulative about it, or not even, but just like honest, it also really behooves you to be sweet with those kids because their mom will love you more.
Well, yeah. And I mean, and I would say not only should you not expect the things that you said, you shouldn't expect anything from these kids. I mean, they don't owe you anything. You shouldn't expect anything. But it's not like I think you're kind of getting at, it's not like totally selfless, like, and it is about you. But what it is about not being ruled by your emotions as a grown-up. It's about being an adult and, having some self-control and having some understanding about where other people are coming from and, controlling your behavior in a way that you want to and that you intend to and being intentional about it, which I think is kind of not that much to ask of an adult.
Well, and I remember you talking about before treating kids, your philosophy of treating kids as people, right? Not like these little baby things, but like just sort of they're an actual human being and relating to them like that. Do you remember talking about that?
Yeah, they're also not little adults, right? They're not like your friend. They're not, but they are, they're people with the full suite of emotions and problems and stuff, same as you. And if you can try to remember back to when you were a kid and what your sort of, what that felt like and what your motivations were, I think that helps.
And I remember you, and this is just how you are as a person, so it may not occur to you how special it is, like always being such a good listener. And if the kids were speaking, listening to them, remembering things they talked about, taking interest in what they were interested in. And it just takes a little bit of effort and thoughtfulness to do that, and taking on the empathetic role of them and like remembering to ask about the chess, remembering to ask about, what that football, Little Giants football or whatever that was back then. Remember they were playing the little football league?
Oh,
in San Antonio.
Yeah, it wasn't Pop Warner, but it was like that.
Yeah. The San Antonio version. Or remembering about, soccer and stuff like that and asking them. And when I think back to that time period, like before we got engaged, a couple other pro tips and pros, I mean, we're not really pros whatsoever, except that we survived it. And, we got one kid off to college doing great. So, I mean, we have at least one star on our coat. Like I'm envisioning us with like lieutenant, colonel, parenting things, right?
Totally.
So we got like one, what does a very fancy military dude get? Like a star or a bar? Do you know what makes them fancy?
Well, you get all kinds of things, yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, so we got at least one of those. Other one's TBD. Anyway, but we didn't push it. And I think that is, I mean, knowing myself now, it's very surprising about me, but I had the intuition and the sense to not rush anything.
Yeah.
Because I remember people saying, maybe even my mom or something back then, like, well, he's going to have to get used to it. Just have to get in the deep end, like the deep end of parenting is like going to I don't know, when we were very first dating, family Christmas with little kids. So we would have been dating from February, but we didn't do Christmas together. We didn't do Thanksgiving together that first year.
Not that first year.
And
I hadn't moved here yet.
Yeah. But that was the right move.
Yeah.
It would have been too much. It's like, I remember saying,
of course, that's very your mom also.
Yeah, bless her. But I was like, I'm not pushing Drew Bell into the deep end. And even on the weekends back in the very beginning when we were dating, and I lived on that one house on Eaton Street, remember? You'd come down from Austin for the weekend. And one of the nights when the kids were in town, one of the nights you would hang out with me and the kids. And then one of the nights you would go do something with a friend who lived in San Antonio or Ricardo or whatever. And I remember even Ricardo being like, what's the deal? And I mean, surprising knowing me now, but that Hannah was like, look, he's just doing what he's doing. And I gave you your space to still maintain sort of your individuality and personhood without demanding hey, you're in San Antonio, why don't you come over to the house? Because there's all these kids here. And you still get to have those moments where you're not a part of that. And I think us being willing to let each other do what each other was doing without rushing any of it or ever rushing them into it was the key to our success. Do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, there was part of that was also what do you want the kids to see about staying over at the house?
Oh,
and
well,
that sort
yeah.
of thing. So that was because what you're talking about was at the beginning. I remember that, and so that was an element to it too. And I don't know that there's any hard and fast right thing to do there. I think you just have to figure out what's best for you. But
well, for us,
I think that was best for us.
Yeah, one of the rules we had was we weren't going to move in together until we got engaged. Because to me, I knew once Drew got engaged, there would be no backing out. That's his word. Drew always keeps his word. Oh, I love you.
Love you too.
And so I knew once we were engaged, he would keep his word. We weren't going to be like breaking up. So that was a rule for us. And then another rule was whenever Drew stayed over, we didn't sleep in the same bed. Like one of the kids, like one of the boys, you slept in their bed, and then or Lucy's had the bigger bed, maybe some kid's bed or something you slept in, and they slept with me.
Yeah.
And we slept
I think
in
it was Lucy's.
Yeah, we slept in different rooms until we were engaged, because I was like, look, if you're sleeping in there in the bed with me, it's like that's like the dad's spot. And I think it would feel to them like a divorce all over again. And you can just walk away, bro. You can just leave. And until you're not going to go, like once we're engaged, that's how we're doing it. And we maintained that. We never once slipped, ever, the whole time until we got engaged. Then we all moved in together. And then that's when you went off for the secondment semester away situation. But I think that was really important to it working for us. Now, let's do that. Let's fast forward a little bit. And so this was sort of in the early on. And this is just our thoughts on how you begin to integrate. It would be a completely different story if Drew would have been, divorced with his own kids. That is a whole lot harder, because then you got to integrate a whole different set of things, another co-parent. That would have been
different. I mean, it's harder on the whole unit. I think it might be easier on like the dad, right, who already has kids.
Yeah, but then he's got to worry about his kids and
it's a different set of problems.
Choose your heart, I guess. Now, okay, so let's think about once we were engaged. So we had like told the world we're going to be together forever. And what happened for us is we got engaged, and I'll back up one little thing. What we ended up doing was our own kind of like quote unquote version of like a little bit me moving, like living with you in Austin, meaning this is like more theory than anything, but it was symbolic for us. Was I left stuff at Drew's place in Austin, and when the kids weren't with me, when the kids weren't with us, right, we would try to be wherever the other one was on all the other days. Like we were making that effort sort of before we officially lived together when we were engaged. So like I would come up to Austin a couple of days a week. You would come down to San Antonio a day or two a week. And we sort of made that work.
It was a lot of driving.
It was so much. But it given us time to kind of get used to each other in that way, to make sure, like we were trying to be really careful about these kids. Drew was always sensitive to that. And I mean, I can say this, it's kind of like jumping the gun a little bit, but one thing about you, Drew, that I think made this whole thing work ultimately is not once, even for a moment, have you made me choose between you and the kids.
Yeah.
Ever. In every situation, you supported me doing absolutely everything I needed to do for the kids. It was never like, well, and it wasn't even like, as obvious as no ultimatum, like do this or that or you'll lose me. It wasn't even like that. It was like even in the smallest subtleties, like it was never a question for me.
Well, and you never put me in a position where that would have happened. I mean, it also just, it would not be a good position for me to have been in, right? I mean, I don't like your chances if you're a guy out there and you put yourself in between a mom and her kids.
Yeah. I mean, but I think that like what that can do is rip a woman apart. I've known friends who it's like, and maybe this is once they're already married and they're already all kind of in this new situation where they do feel like they have to choose between their new spouse or take a side, right? Maybe like ultimately choose, but to take a side where like, the kids and the new partner are fighting.
Yeah.
And then they both kind of look at mom, like, whose side are you going to be on?
Yeah, yeah.
We've never, ever once has that ever happened. And it's a high bar to live up to, y'all. And it's made all the difference for us. And I think what that does too is it doesn't put the kids in the position of feeling like they're in a contest or that sometimes their mom might have to suffer to choose them. And I think that's the other thing. Like I would have always, of course, chosen my children, period, the end of the story. And I'm glad they didn't feel like there was a war on me to do that because kids don't want their mama to hurt. They don't want that. Okay, so fast forward a little bit. we're engaged and living together for real. And let's just talk a little bit about that transition when all of a sudden single in a town, Drew Bell now has all these kids in the house, and sometimes they come down, the boys come down wearing his gym shorts. It still happens every once in a while.
Yeah.
And can you talk a little bit about what that was like for you? Maybe any missteps or any words of advice that you might have?
Well, so this was down in San Antonio. You know, I mean, it was definitely a huge shift. I mean,
because I think that's when our true family began.
Yeah,
right.
I think that's fair, and I think that like, you know, it couldn't have been really simple for you either. But yeah, I mean,
and the kids. Oh, we got to say that because we got engaged, and the kids moved back in. That's what happened all at once. So we got engaged because our leases were up and all that, and we needed to we were going to move in together. Right. And my deal was I'm not moving in together till we're getting engaged. The engagement's a whole different other story. We can tell someday.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to.
No, we'll do it later. Yeah, Drew. This is a very Drew Bell moment. Anyways, we move in together. We get engaged so that we were going to anyway.
So we got engaged when the kids were during their summer visitation with their dad. So they weren't there.
Right.
So yeah, we get engaged and then they're coming back.
To primarily move to San Antonio with us.
Yes.
For good.
Yes. Right.
That was a period in life, wasn't it?
It was really wild. I mean, it was really, truly one of the most wild times I've ever had. You know,
that's a whole different episode.
And we knew it was coming, but not for that long.
Yeah, no, what happened was I went back and we filed a custody modification that kind of kept growing and turned into, in Texas, we can have jury trials about custody. So there was a jury trial and I was successful. So that meant the kids were relocating. So they had then had to flip and they had their 30 days with dad, came back. Very ill-conceived plan on our part now, but Drew was wanting to tell the kids, it was the first time we'd seen them in a while. Drew was wanting to tell the kids hey, I asked your mom to marry me, and all of that. So he tells them kind of the first time he got to see him. Well, I don't think we'd fully pieced together.
I picked them up.
Yeah, Drew, you went to get him because you wanted to talk to him before they came home to this house we're all in together.
Right. This was our grand plan. Right?
Yeah, it was so dumb. We would do it differently now.
Yeah.
And you're going to make mistakes. That's the thing. I think we've done a really bang up job doing it, and we've made a lot of mistakes too. So Drew goes to get him to tell him, well, they're just leaving their dads, in their minds, for good, and moving back, which they all had very different emotions about that experience. And Drew is like, oh, and by the way, we're engaged. That was one of the wilder days we've had.
Yeah.
But anyway, so then we're all living together. Okay. Now this is when you went. So we had a little bit of a break in the move in together and could ease in again because Drew went what's called seconded. So his law firm loaned him to a client. And during the week, he was like one of those a travel dad. So he during the week was gone and working there, and then came back San Antonio to home where we all lived. Drew didn't have the apartment in Austin anymore, and we were all there. So let's just talk about in general, Drew. So with us all living together for real all the time, we were sleeping in the same bed then because we were engaged. So that was happening. What was that like? Does anything stand out to you? Any words of counsel? Any words of warning?
Well, I mean, it was the first time when, first of all, I'm living in this, my living space was not sort of totally up to me. What happened was not up to me.
Yeah, because before that you'd been you leave your grapefruit bowl out on the counter. When you come home, it'll still just be in that same spot.
Yeah, right. And so now
you'd be like, where's the spoons? What happened to all the spoons?
And maybe it's a me thing, but it was a huge change to go from that to not only living with you full time, but to then also having these kids and their sneakers and everything is everywhere and
that spot when you walk in by the door and everybody just drops all their shit.
Well, if you can open the door because the shoes are, acting as a door jamb, yes, you can see the pile of shoes and,
And you were a pretty like neat, orderly, tidy person.
yeah, I don't love that. And so that definitely just sort of the amount of people around and the amount of sort of, clutter that kids naturally create, was definitely like stressful kind of thing for me. Also the like, you come home, it's not necessarily like peaceful and quiet time. It's
because the kids were like
yeah,
fourth and fifth and or like
younger.
fifth and
they were
third and second grade, I think.
Yeah.
Whew. And that's an age with kids. In the best of circumstances, that's a whole mood right there.
Yeah, and these weren't necessarily the best of circumstances, or at least the easiest of circumstances. And
we had a lot of emotions. We had a lot of anger. We had a lot of new school, new friends, new life. We had a lot of ongoing, X Factor drama, a lot of, how do you say, attack, I don't know, intervention, like insurgent. I don't even know what to say.
Well,
without getting into the whole thing.
Yeah, without getting into the whole thing, it's hard to say exactly, but there was just, you never knew exactly what you were walking into. It was a little bit unpredictable. And kids are always a little bit unpredictable, but this was like a lot unpredictable in your house, which was obviously a little uncomfortable. But there were other things too. Like it's not just like which of the 5 things that I normally cook for myself for dinner am I making tonight for one person. You have to, and I do a lot of the cooking. So like, it's sort of like, how are we cooking for this whole family? And, do the kids like X, Y, Z?
A vegetarian this week.
Right. And what, and who can eat what and who will eat what. And, so that just the logistical challenges were all kind of new to me as well. But ultimately it taught me more of that sort of empathetic kind of thinking about what's best for our whole unit, as opposed to just sort of like what I would personally maybe prefer at any particular point in time. But I was happiest when everybody was happiest, and when everyone was most content and taken care of, especially you. And so my priorities sort of shifted. I mean, they had kind of been shifting anyway, but like, toward what can I do to help make that happen?
Yeah, I think that because now, we've been a family for a long time, but back then it was just the beginning of a family.
Yeah.
And we were newlyweds. And I think, and this will probably be kind of almost as far as we get in our story, right? Just thinking about this initial blend, because there's a lot more about being a co-parent as things go on. But I think that what we did initially, especially after everybody was living in the same house, when we were in San Antonio for about a year, we ended up moving from after that to Austin because it was kind of like now or never. The kids were just starting to make some pretty good friends. All of some of their doctors and providers and things were turning over. It's a long story, but anyway, that was all changing. So it was either we're leaving San Antonio right now and moving to Austin, which remember I committed to Drew I would do, or we're going to stay in San Antonio until these kids graduate high school.
Yeah.
And we made the decision to come to Austin, which added a different set of things. But for just the San Antonio period, really what it was for us was, I think, an incubation as a family. And there were some adjustments. I remember like it bugged me for sure at the time. Like, dude, they're just socks. Like, who cares if the boys wore them? We'll wash them. But for Drew, that was like his space, his thing, sort of his own independence and sovereignty. I'd been a mom already for a long time, so I'm used to like no space is my own and kid stuff all over the place, and them come into my room and I'd come out and some kid had my hairbrush or so I was used to this, but Drew wasn't. And I think there was that adjustment for us was probably the main adjustment. And then, for better or for worse, we had a common threat in our life, right?
Yeah.
You and I had a common threat to the peacefulness of our home in the whole custody situation and everything that continued. So there was much a unite against the common, enemy is the wrong word, but unite against the common problem. And I think that drew us. And that's one of the silver linings in all of this. If you are in the middle of a custody drama and you find your person who's willing to like get back to back with you in the foxhole. Is that how you would say that? Look at me.
It's very good.
Thanks. Back to back with you, like in the foxhole. If you find your person, in some ways, like you cut through a lot of the bullshit in other relationships. Like, I'm kind of annoyed because you didn't like load your dishes right. You're like, I'm sorry. We are dealing with a huge new motion that could change the course of our life right now. We're not worried about who put the dishes in the wrong way. We just like, it gives you some perspective. Yep. So I think for us, that period of time, the silver lining of the custody drama was we were down in the trenches. We knew when we got married, we knew the character of the other person. Fair enough?
Yeah, totally.
Because we were engaged about a year and a half after that.
Mm-hmm.
We knew the character of the other person. We had a very lot of life in a relatively short period of time. And I'd seen Drew and Drew'd seen me getting really bad news, experiencing a really hard and bad day that I'm sure a lot of y'all have days like that. And I hope none of them are ever as bad as some of ours were, when kids are really having a hard time, when you're having a really hard time, when you're scared and you're worried about money and you're worried about whether your life is going to be changed beyond your control. Will you ever have peace again? Will you ever have somebody not trying to take you down every second of every single day? We lived through all of that. And I think it took us probably that first year to start to gel, just to begin to gel. So just kind of practical timing, it takes as long to begin to grow a family at least as it does to grow a baby. Okay. So that's how I would think it. Give yourself 9 months to a year to start to feel a little bit like a unit. And I think for us, we had a natural transition point because we moved to Austin. And so that began the next phase of our life as a family. But I think phase 1 for us ends whenever we left San Antonio, because we'd come together as a crew, started to gel. Some of the egos had started to chill out. And I think also the function of time, and we'll leave y'all on this part with this, is time is your friend in the co-parenting situation, because these are all just little peoples. And relationships grow and develop moment by moment, then day by day, then week by week, year by year. And they are like a fine wine. They do get better with age. I think relationships do. We know this being married now and been together now for 11 years going on. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yes. Married for less than that, obviously, but we just celebrated our 7 years married. That's right. Yes. And the relationship with the kids, your own individual relationship with each kid, I think you treated each one differently.
They are different.
Yeah. And the time moved forward. And that really began to build. And I think apart from being nice to them so their mom would love you, whatever the motivation, if you made it just that black and white in the beginning, I think what ended up happening is you start to love them independently, right? As time goes on, as your own little people. Even if you're not necessarily at that point seeing them as your kids. And I think it's too much to ask of somebody from get-go to see these kids from your prior marriage as their kids, like right away.
Yeah, I do think that's too much to ask of people.
It is.
Because, and I know this now from having our own, together. I mean, so much of that bonding, that kind of parental bonding happens when they're babies, and completely dependent on you. And, I never had that with the other kids. And so, I mean, I definitely felt like they were my family and that, and I loved and cared for them. But I felt all of those things long before I felt they were my kids. Now I feel that way now.
Because back then we thought of it a little bit more like the relationship was more akin to like an uncle, right? Remember, it's how we'd kind of talk about it in the beginning.
Yeah.
At first, of like with your nieces and nephews, you would give them money, you would give them support, you would go and get them at jail if something happened to them, you would give them advice if they asked, but ultimately, like, it's your siblings' call, it's their parents' call, right? You're sort of like, hands up, not really my deal. Now, that's why time is on your side. Because like you said, now I think it's, you see those kids as your kids too.
Yeah, and that is largely a function of time, and I've now known them most of their lives, right? I mean, we've just gone through a lot of things together with them, and so that can happen. But I think it's too much to expect of someone else, and it's definitely too much to expect of yourself to like feel that way at first, and like. I just don't think it helps anybody to pretend like it's something it's not. When what it is not bad, right?
It just is different. And I think that part, the way that we handled that, was really smart of us, and allowed room for it to organically turn into, those aren't Hannah's kids, they're our kids. Right now, and not discounting that they have a dad, like none of that. It's not an either or. It's just that over a long period of time, the relationship shifts, and us having a baby who is their sibling also just adds to that, right? It adds a level of unit solidarity or something too. Whenever we had Penny. So, okay, Drew. Well, I guess that's where we'll sort of on that take everybody. There's so many more things to talk about in some juicier stuff and what we did as they grew up and things like that.
What a cliffhanger.
Woo! I know. All right, but now, Drew, so we asked the same questions of everybody, and you're not excluded. The show is obviously called Not Saving It for Later.
Okay.
And I found that phrase is pretty evocative for people. It brings up something. Maybe they're immediately convicted about something that they save for later. Or several guests have talked about, oh no, they never save anything for later, obviously, because you just live right now. So where do you fall on that continuum?
I save things for later all the time, although I'm trying not to. Especially as I get older. There's this book that we have both read called Die with Zero, and it's really changed the way that I've thought of this. I mean, it's easy to go through life thinking like you're doing the smart thing when you're literally saving for later, right? Money and so forth, and deferring like expensive experiences and things like that because you don't want to be irresponsible, and you think about all the compound interest you'll be missing out on and things like that, and all that exciting stuff. But like at a certain point, especially as you get older, it later is now. It's later. Welcome to later.
Yeah, you're here.
So you just have to figure out what that balance is and think about it actually, because there are things you can do now when you're young enough that you're not going to be able to do later. There's no reason to save those things for later because there will be no later for those things. If you want to learn how to snowboard, if you want to scale Kilimanjaro, right? You should probably do it now, or at least sooner rather than later, because those options won't be options before too long. Which is part of the message of that book. It's not to be irresponsible or to like, people say, well, how would you live if there were no tomorrow? I mean, I don't think that's a very responsible way to live, but it does mean think about what you want your life to look like, and if there are things that you have to do now that you want to be in your life, don't hold back on them just because maybe they're more expensive than you would expect, or maybe it'll hurt your retirement savings, because what are you saving for? I mean, you should be saving for now. And So I'm trying to be better about that because it's not my natural way. So I guess as a broad way, that's what I would say is I totally save things for later, but I'm trying to save less for later.
Yeah, hey, that Die with Zero book, we'll have to link that for sure because that has been so transformative for us in our marriage, the way we think about money and the way we think about how we're doing things. And getting on the same page about that has been super important. Okay, well, related, the next question is what's shaken you? Like, is there any book? I mean, I know we just talked about that one that we read a while back, like book, podcast, TV show, anything like that that we need to be thinking about, a quote you saw recently that's kind of shaken you up.
Well, let's see. I think in terms of shaking me up, I mean, right now I know we're not wearing our pumpkin shirts right now, but it is it is actually Halloween when we're recording this. So,
Yeah.
Around Halloween, I like to sort of, read some sort of Halloween sort of themed short stories. And so right now I'm reading these short stories by Daphne du Maurier, who's one of my favorite writers, and it's called "Don't Look Now" and Other Stories. So it's 5 short stories. I'm only through 2 of them, but anyway, it's just perfect for the season, and they're fun.
Yeah, Drew always so good at holidays and traditions, and he is definitely the tradition, sort of like team spirit, holiday spirit holder at our house. So yeah, that's no surprise you're doing that. Okay, what about your dominant thought? What's been your dominant thought of recent? We've had a lot going on in our lives right now. So, overarching thought the last few weeks, last few days, even.
Well, aside from some some move we're making, which maybe we don't need to talk about, but yeah, I mean we're moving into a new house soon, so that's been a dominant thought for us, and what our what our kind of new. It's not just a new house. It's going to be a new way of life.
We're going to have a garden.
Yeah. Yeah, and
As our daughter tells us all the time, we're going to grow a lot of fruits and veggies.
Yes, that's right. You're going to be farmer girls.
Yeah, we're going to be farmer girls forever.
And it's just, what all the possibilities it's a house that in a property that allows us to have a lot of possibilities. A lot of, and I think we're planning to be there forever. So Hannah and I may die in that house.
Yep.
And it's an expansive way to think about our lives, to think about what we can do to the house to make the rest of our lives there, as amazing as possible. And I've never moved into a place thinking that this is the last time I'm going to do this, but I'm really, really excited about that.
Yeah, me too. All right, last question, closing thoughts. If you were going to tell the women of divorce land, so those of us before, during, and after divorce, one thing, what would you tell us?
Well, I think I would tell you, don't be afraid, which is easy for me to say, not being a divorced woman myself. But having seen enough of it to say, I think it's easy to be afraid of the legal process. I think it's easy to be afraid of your ex-husband, or your ex-wife, or whoever it is. What are they going to do next? How are they going to come after me? This and that. It's easy to be afraid of what, your life and your relationship prospects can look like after divorce. It's easy to be afraid of what divorce is going to do to your kids. And I think I would just say that while those things are all things to be aware of and to plan for and can be scary, I think don't be afraid of any of them because they can all go just fine. The legal process, it is what it is. It may or may not go your way. It's probably not going to go at least 100% your way. But, your ex-spouse is probably just as afraid of it as you are. And, it is what it is. It's just a necessary part of the process that every single person who's gotten divorced has gone through to one degree or another, and they're still standing. Don't be afraid of your ex-spouse if it's a high conflict situation. Probably get a lawyer, and listen to your lawyer. But also, my advice as a lawyer is you will have opportunities to take it to them. You are not powerless in that situation, stand up for yourself, and don't assume that just because they say something is going to go a certain way that's the way it is.
Amen.
Be courageous and stand up for what you think is right. I mean, don't be stupid, but they're just sort of not the boss of you anymore. That's why you're leaving.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's a good way to say it. They're not the boss of you.
Yeah.
It's the point.
With your kids, it's going to be hard on them probably, to one degree or another. But it's probably not going to be as hard on them as it would be if you stayed in a situation that was really bad for you. And while it is bad it could be bad for them now, long term, it will probably be better for them. And we've certainly seen that. And especially if you do all the, and no one's going to do all the right things all the time, but if you try to, have their interests in mind as above your own, that's the way Hannah's always done it. That's why she's such a fantastic mom. They're going to turn out just fine. So, anyway, I guess that's my message. It's kind of a long message.
That's good. Yeah. Take heart, be of good courage, and they're not the boss of you. That's literally the point. I love that. I mean, I remember having to beat that in my own head. Like, they're not the boss of me. You're not the boss of me. I don't have to do what you say anymore. That's it. Ugh, it's the best.
Well, and just because they say the sky is orange doesn't make it so.
It's hard. It's hard when you've been trusting that person, and in that relationship, the law even makes it, at least in Texas, a fiduciary relationship, one of trust and confidence. And to shift from that is not easy. So I think that reminder, y'all, Drew knows what he's talking about. He's the best lawyer that I know and has lived an up close front row / in the middle of it life for over 10 years of drama in this area. So he knows what he speaks of. So Drew, thank you for coming and doing this. I think it's the first of many times. There's so many other things I want to talk about to share with people, the stuff that we've been through. So thanks for doing it.
Yeah, well, thank you. This was great.
Yeah.